Hello, YouTube land. This is Brent and Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. I have Shawn Weed coming to share the most interesting story that I believe that I've ever heard since I've been collecting stories. It is incredible. You've got to watch this all the way through. Let the beginning happen where he develops the characters and things like that, telling you kind of who was there and that all that kind of stuff. Just stick with it. I'm telling you, it's amazing. I've never heard anything like this story. I wouldn't say that if it didn't measure up, but I'm telling you, if you watch this video all the way through, you are going to be amazed. It has so much. I can't wait to see the comments. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been trying to get this guy for over a year too. So I've had help from John Von Bronsnake. So thank you, John. If anyone out there has a story that they would like to share on this channel, whether it be cryptids, paranormal, any kind of story that you think be a good, fascinating story that would, be entertaining and informative, possibilities, things like that, contact me at brentonson@gmail.com. Give me a description of your story, contact information. I will get back to you. If anyone out there wants to contribute to help me with this channel and making videos and what have you, go to the link in the description. It's a PayPal Me link, super easy to use. You just one click and you're right there. I appreciate every contribution that I have gotten. All right, so let's go see Shawn Weed and listen to this fascinating story. Shawn, if you don't mind, I'd like to say welcome to the show for first of all, and if you would give a brief bio on yourself, and then we'll get into your story.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. Well, like you said, my name is Shawn Weed. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, raised in Louisiana. The age of 19, I joined the Marine Corps and stayed in there for roughly 13 years. I'm currently living in Los Angeles. I'm married to Rose Maria. I have 2 daughters. And I'm currently working out of LA in the general area as a electrician and photovoltaic installer.
Wow. I didn't know you was in the Marines for that long. That's a pretty good stint there. When I heard the story told before, it was I can't imagine how you could tell it better. But we'll just let you go with it. If you want to, just start with it and don't spare any details.
Okay. Well, like I said, I was in the Marine Corps for 13 years. I guess start the story off in where pretty much where the video picks up on it, which would be 29 Palms, California. At that time, I was a Lance Corporal. I had been in for roughly, I guess, 3 years. I was roughly about 22 years old, and the date was April the 4th of 1994. And kind of like I said on my video, I mean, God knows I have a terrible memory for dates. I mean, history was one of my worst subjects, so he made it easy for me to remember. It's 444. April was 4th month, 4th day in 1994.
Wow.
So like I said, at that time, I'm an old man now. I'm 44 years old. So at that time, I was half of what I am right now. I was 22 years old. Basically, me and a few other guys were clowning around, and basically, for lack of better words, we were left out. Because when you're in the Marines and in artillery coming from Camp Lejeune, you pack up everything that you own on a train, and then the train carries everything, all your artillery pieces, all your Humvees, your 7 tons, whatever you have. And then all the Marines get on planes and fly over there, and then you pick up your gear whenever it gets there. And it's usually not very far behind. It usually only takes about a week for it to get there. It's like 3 or 4 days for it to go from coast to coast on train.
Right.
When artillery goes there, we are there for a month and a half. And it's like, if you forget anything, you're just without. So you better make sure that you pack everything, including the kitchen sink.
Right.
So we packed everything. We went to 29 Palms, California, and in 29 Palms, California, there's this small camp called Camp Wilson. And that's kind of like a field base, I guess, kind of like a gathering point for everybody to go back and rest and relax in between the field operations, or the field ops, as we call them.
Okay.
So anyway, we trained for 3 weeks with a infantry unit. And then that infantry unit at the end of 3 weeks flies back to Camp Lejeune. And it takes them roughly 2 days to, pack up and leave. And then another infantry unit, another 2 days to come back. So we have 4 days with absolutely nothing to do. So when artillery's there, instead of just, cooling our heels, they give us an option. They either say you can go to Disneyland or you can go to Vegas. And of course, if you don't have money, which the other 3 guys that were in my little area, we didn't have any money. So everybody else took off, and we're just kind of like I said, cooling our heels there at base, pretty much doing nothing.
Right.
And anyway, to set the scene, the characters, there was 3 of us who were in the room at the time, and one was his name was Corporal Jason Laycock. Of course, he's probably like a master sergeant by now or something like that. And the other one was Corporal Toby Page, and like I said, I was a lance corporal, which is 1 rank below them. These 2 guys were in the room, and we're just sitting around, shooting the breeze, talking, just relaxing and whatnot. And Corporal Jason Laycock, he breaks out his pictures and he starts showing us his pictures that he had taken while we were actually during those first 3 weeks. He was under a naval lieutenant, but basically he just told this lieutenant what to do, because the naval lieutenant was, he was a junior grade lieutenant, and Corporal Jason Laycock was like, I guess you could say, when it came to intelligence, he was like a master chess player.
Right.
You didn't tell him what to do.
Right.
So this, this junior grade lieutenant, even though he was an officer, and Jason Laycock was a enlisted guy, he was the one in charge.
Yeah.
So he basically, during the final stages of the first operation, the first 3 weeks, we train, and then at the end, we do what's called a CAC, the Combined Arm Exercise, and that's the whole idea to training, is to eventually incorporate these 3 pieces into one. So basically, once everybody's trained up, and everybody knows what they're doing, everybody's running at full steam, and, everybody's locked on, we designate a target, and then we all assault it at the same time. Now, if you tried this on, like, day 1, you'd fail miserably and kill a lot of people,
Yeah. Right.
So that's the whole point of training up until that point.
Right.
So that we can, do this mission without killing each other,
Right.
without artillery shooting short or long.
Yeah.
Without the infantry overlapping their field of fire and killing each other, because we're doing it with live bullets.
Yeah. that is quite amazing how accurate you need to be and how good you guys really are. That is incredible, really.
Yeah, well, it comes with that old adage or old saying: the more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in war.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's something that, I mean, it's instilled in us.
Right.
You know, as Marines. So anyway, he had driven up to the impact area, inside of where, and luckily he wasn't in front of where the infantrymen were assaulting the target, because they literally block and load and shoot live rounds, 50 caliber, mortars, the whole nine. I mean, everybody's just, assaulting the target. Of course, artillery shoots over the top of their heads, and then the plane comes in, drops its bomb, artillery shoots the back door, and then it's game over. Because once you drop the bomb, that's it.
Right.
So you basically assault it with infantry to instill chaos. You want everybody who's being assaulted to just, run, duck, cover, that kind of thing. You want them to basically scatter like ants. And he had driven. He knew where all the pieces were on the playing board, so he knew where to drive, not to be, in anybody's way. But he was in front of the field of fire, not for artillery and not for the aircraft, but for the infantrymen. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
This guy was nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, he was brilliant, but at the same time, he was crazy. He would do stuff like that just, you'd be like, where's your common sense?
Right.
He balances, he calculates the odds of being hit in a situation like that, and then just says, okay, is this worth it?
Right.
For me, it's gambling, and I would not have done what he did in a million years, but he drove forward, and he was basically taking pictures of, the infantrymen from, I guess, a flank, I guess you could call it that, from the side. And, but like I said, in front of, so you can see the infantrymen assaulting down the hill. You can see the artillery rounds going off. You can see, the plane coming in, dropping its bombs. I mean, he just had fantastic pictures that nobody should have.
Wow. Sounds interesting.
Because he put himself in harm's way to get them.
Right.
I guess this guy would probably make a great combat photographer, but, I mean, he had amazing pictures.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, we're sitting there looking at him, and we're like, he goes through them all, and we're just blown away by him. We're like, how did you, how did you get these? These are impossible to get. And he told us, and we're like, dude, are you freaking retarded? Are you crazy? Because it was nuts. You look at him and you just go, wow. I mean, just the next one was better than the next, than the last. And we're like, do you have, when they got to the bottom of the pile, we're like, do you have any more? We were kind of like addicted to it,
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I have this other role, but I still have three photos to take.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, take them. And he's like, man, I don't waste film. He's like, if I'm going to take a photo, it's going to be something that I want to take a picture of. Otherwise I'm not going to take a picture. And we're like, come on, man, just click, and go. And he's like, okay. He's like, I tell you what, everybody get up. And then we turn, and he has this green folding cot, which, when we go out to Camp Wilson, that's the only time we have a cot. Otherwise, we're sleeping on the ground in sleeping bags.
Right.
But we had these green cots set up and what's called an A-frame. And he's like, this guy, obviously, I mean, it seemed to me that he came from a very wealthy, very influential family. I mean, because he obviously had a very good education, being in intelligence and being as smart as he was, I mean, the guy was phenomenally smart. But he he said, okay, I want to take a picture of this rack. And for us, I grew up in the country, I've slept on the ground, I've, camped out, I've done all kinds of stuff, But for him, it was kind of like a novel experience. He's like, I want my family to see where my sleeping situation, because I guess he's, like I said, silver spoon. But so he takes a picture of his cot, and we do another picture. We're kind of like leaning on each other, like a buddy photo, And how Marines are, just trying to look cool and whatnot. And the last picture, he goes, man, we gotta make this good. I can't just go out like this, And we're like, okay, well, what do you want? And he looks over, and there's this noose that someone had tied and was hanging from one of the rafters. And, if I could draw an A-frame for you, I mean, it was literally, if you looked at it from the end, it was literally it almost looked like a chicken bird. It's very long, very thin, but the roof would slant down until it almost touched the ground. I mean, it's literally like almost a foot and a half off the ground. You can literally go to the side of it and walk up the thing, although it's very steep. But you can literally walk up the side of the A-frame from the ground. But it's kind of weird to see a roof go all the way down to the ground, but that's kind of what we were living in. It had a tin roof, and the inside was all like 2x4s. So it was very poorly built. There was no roof. You could see the rafters running across, and the lights were, they had a hole drilled through the 2x4s, and a wire pulled through and lights hanging bare, the old like Edison style light bulbs, just hanging down from the ceilings. And if you were tall like me, I'm 6'1", you would walk through there and, like the lights would be literally like an inch over your head. If you were 1 inch taller, you would have to, dodge the lights, but, otherwise you're going to hit your head on the light.
Okay.
Or a bare bulb. But anyway, someone had tied a noose and out of old hay rope that we use to make sure that the gear doesn't fall out of the back of the vehicle. When it's in transport. Whenever it's transport and you load everything on the train, you have to prepare it so that it will not get looted or robbed or, things like that. Stuff won't fall off. We had all this hay rope, and of course you got to keep it because at the end you're going to need to pack everything up and put it back on the train to go back. So you're going to need the hay rope again. So I had all this hay rope sitting in the corner, and someone had they got bored, tied a 13-knot noose out of it, and just hung it up there. Now, this noose came down from the ceiling, the rafter, like I said. It came down from the rafter, and the loop or the noose, actually, the noose itself, the round part, was, I would say, probably about knee high. It was literally only about a foot off the ground.
Right.
And literally, you just walk past and knock it out of the way and just keep on walking to where you were going. I mean, nobody really ever, considered it anything. They're just, Marines get bored. They do weird stuff. Anyway, they had tied this noose and hung it down. And it was out of hay rope, and anybody who's ever, for a lot of people who are in the city, they have no idea what I'm talking about here, but anybody who's ever owned horses, cattle, or whatever, used to do play days or rodeos, whatever you want to call them, they used to have real stiff rope that's waxed, so that when, so that when you throw your lariat, throw your lasso, it stays open until it hits its target, and then you snatch back on it, and it slides real easy through the loop, and it cinches down on you so fast that, but it wasn't that kind of rope. It wasn't a rope that you could literally hang yourself from. Nobody could hang themselves with this thing, because it wouldn't slide, period, and You could literally, like, put your foot in it, grab a hold of the rope that's dangling down and stand up on it. You know, as long as you didn't weigh too much, you wouldn't break the 2x4. You could literally stand on it. It wouldn't sit you down around your foot. You know?
Yeah.
And it would probably, if it even started sliding down towards the ground, it would probably hit the ground before it even sent you around your foot. You know, that's how long it was.
Right.
You know, so nobody really bothered with it. They were just like, you know, noose, you know, slap it off to the side and go around it. Well, Jason Laycock, he lives over there at the Corporal Laycock. As we Marines, I call each other by the last name anyway. He looked at the noose and he goes, I got an idea, you know. And like I always say, I mean, this is pretty much akin to a redneck going, hey, y'all, watch this. You know, whenever you hear that, just go ahead and break out your phone and start recording because something terrible's going to happen.
Right.
You know, and you definitely want to, you know, put it on YouTube. You know?
Right.
You know, so he gets this look in his eye, and he's like, I got an idea. And I'm like, oh, no. You know? He looks at this noose, and he goes, hey, Lance Corporal Weed, come here. I'm like, what? And he's like, hey, why don't you go over there and put your head in the noose, you know, squat down, put your head in the noose, and I'll take a picture from your waist up and make it look like you really hanged yourself. You know, and I'm like, okay, you know, it's kind of one of those stupid pictures, you know, like where, you know, people are like, you know, leaning against you know, trying to hold up a rock or, you know, grabbing the sun with their hand or, you know, leaning against the Leaning Tower of Pisa, something like that. But they're, you know, it's just optical illusions. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, it's one of those things. I'm thinking, okay, well, he wants to create one of those stupid fake pictures, you know? And I'm like, okay, I'm down. You know, I'll try anything once. You know, being me and stupid and naive and a little bit crazy. You know, I'm like, sure. You know, so I go over there and squat down and I put my head in the noose. And I'm like, okay, is this good? You know, I'm looking at him. I'm like, okay, is this good? He's like, well, do something. Like, close your eyes. And I'm like, okay. And he squats down, and I'm kind of like, he's like, cock your head off a little bit, you know, a little bit to the right. I'm like, okay. I'm like, are we good? And he goes, yeah. And he kneels down, and he goes to take the picture, and the batteries had worn out. And he's like, oh, man. You know, because the thing was flashing at him. Well, light was flashing at him. You know, I guess the battery indicator light or whatever it was.
Right.
So he goes, oh. So he goes back over to his rack. He takes the batteries out, puts new batteries in, and comes over there, kneels down, and he's getting ready to take the picture when Corporal Jason comes, Corporal Toby Page comes up to him. And Corporal Page looks at him and goes, he starts whispering into his ear. He's, you know, he's like, and you know, of course he stands back up and he looks at him and he goes, nah, bro, that's not the way it works. He goes, if I buy, you fly. And he reaches into his wallet and he pulls out a $10 bill and he hands it to him. And of course he goes out the door. So I'm thinking to himself, you know, okay, what's the big secret of it? You know, to me it looked a little bit off, you know, but that's just the way that thing works. You know, if you're broke but willing to make a journey, you know, you can ask the other person, hey, I buy, you fly. You know, and that you borrow money and then you can go get what you want, you know, a pack of smokes, beer, or just candy or cigarettes or whatever it is, you know.
Right.
You know, and then the other person, you know, for their service of going to go get it, they're allowed to get something that they want too.
Right.
You know, so if, you know, if you're like broke, like, hey, man, you buy, I fly. You know, if you're out of cigarettes, and he's like, okay, cool. You know, give me a pack of smokes, you get a pack of smokes, whatever, you know. So they both have. But the one didn't have to go out of his way to get it. You know, so he goes running out the door. And I'm thinking, okay. You know, he's just going down to the PX to grab some food or something, you know. And as soon as he goes out the door, he goes, okay. He goes, let's take this last picture. I'm like, good, let's take the last picture. And he's like, okay, now this is what you do. And he goes, this time we're going to make it good. I'm like, okay. He goes, okay, now stick your head in the noose. I'm like, okay. He's like, okay, now cock your head to the right, just like you did last time. Okay, yeah. He's like, let your arms dangle loosely. Don't, like, prop them up in your lap. Your shoulders are getting up. Well, okay. You know, and he's talking to me. And what he's doing is he's talking so fast, you know, that he's using his voice to mask Corporal W. Page sneaking up behind me. You know, he had come in the door behind me. Of course, I had my eyes closed, so I didn't know it. You know, and he's sneaking up, you know, in the sand behind me. Of course, sand is not a hard thing to sneak up on, you know.
Right.
So he's using his voice. He's like, okay, now kneel down and, you know, cock your head to the right, stick out your tongue, close your eyes, relax your shoulders, let your arms dangle free. Of course, he comes right behind me. He grabs the knot and slams it down around my throat. Now, me, it caught me by complete surprise, and it was just by, I'm guessing, he wasn't, you know, he was trying to play a joke on me.
Right.
You know, and of course, like I said, I'm a big guy. You know, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was 6'1", 220 pounds. I could lift 400 pounds like it was no problem. They see me pick up a trailer filled with equipment that weighed 550 pounds, pick up the tow hitch, and turn it all the way around by myself.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
They see me do stuff like that, you know? And in my artillery unit, there was literally only one guy who was stronger than me. And this guy was like 6'3" and like, you know, 250.
Right.
You know, he was just a bull, you know. But this guy, he could probably, he actually lifted 640 pounds one time. You know, we watched him do it. You know, but my max was like 500. 400 would be like, I'm not straining that much. I'm kind of like 70% maxed out, you know. They see me lift really, really heavy stuff. I mean, stuff that one person should never attempt to lift. You know, never had a hernia. You know, I've always just been able to use my entire body, you know, to grab a hold of things and pick it up. I mean, just like no problem. But, you know, they thought, okay, well, he's going to get out of this, you know. So, like I said, he snuck up behind me, snapped this thing down around my neck, and I don't know if it was just bad luck or providence or whatever, but I had just breathed out. I just exhaled when he snapped this thing down around my neck. Now, this thing has got a hold of me, and it literally feels like if someone walks up to you and just begins choking you with both hands, you know? If they could fit their fingers all the way around your throat, you know, so that the entirety of your neck is just, you know, pinched, you know. That's what it felt like. It literally felt like some 7-foot guy like Shaquille O'Neal or something just walked up behind me and just started choking me, you know. And of course, I immediately stood up. You know, he caught me out by complete surprise. You know, 1 minute I'm kneeling down, and all of a sudden, bam! I can't breathe. And so I stood up, and I'm like, oh, geez, you know, and I'm trying to breathe in, and I can't. You know, and this thing is dangling down from my neck. The noose is tight around my neck, like I said, like someone's choking me. And then it's dangling down towards my knee and then back up to the rafter. That's, you know, all the slack that I had. You know, so I could have just run around, you know, because this thing had so much slack on it. But at the same time, this thing was choking me. You know, so it wasn't like it wasn't taut. The rope itself wasn't taut or tight, except for where it was grabbing me around the neck. And so I'm like, oh, geez. And I can't breathe. So I'm like, I'm going to get this thing off of me. And that's the first thing I'm thinking. You know, no problem. I'm going to get this thing off. And so I put a finger down inside the noose, and I grabbed the ball of the, you know, I'm going to call it a ball. It's kind of more like a really thick stick, you know, because like 13 knots when they're wrapped around top of each other are probably about 8 inches long, you know, and about 2 inches around, you know, so it's like grabbing hold of the handle of a baseball bat, you know. So I grabbed the knot, for lack of better words, I stuck a finger in the noose, and of course, this thing, I could feel this thing tighten down around my neck even more when I stuck the finger in there. And it was hard to get one finger in. It was like I literally scratched my neck trying to get one finger in there. That's how tight it was. So I just got one finger in there, I grabbed the knot, and I pulled on it hard. And this thing is not budging. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe one finger is just not enough leverage. So I'm like, I'm going to try to get two in there. And so I literally once again stuck another finger down inside there, and jammed it down inside there. And of course, it's even more tight. My head's like ready to pop like a freaking, grape. And I'm like, okay, this is my last chance. I can feel myself, losing it. So I'm like, I've been an avid swimmer, so I know just how much time I have. I know it. I have seconds. You know what I'm saying? I could swim, 100, 50 meters under the water, but I know in those last few seconds how much time I have and when I need to get to the top. You know what I'm saying? It was the same thing here. I knew I had roughly about 2 to 3 seconds left before, I passed out. So I'm like, this is it, all or nothing. You know what I'm saying? I got that second finger in there, and I literally crouched down, like in a fighting position. I grabbed that knot, I gritted my teeth, I closed my eyes, and I pulled for all I was worth. So I was like, man, I got to get this thing loose. I got to get a breath. You know what I'm saying? And I only had 2 seconds. And sure enough, I pulled for all I was worth. I was like, just grunting and gritting and, trying to get this thing off of me. And then while I was standing there pulling on this thing, I felt something give way. And I kind of stumbled forward. And when I stumbled forward, I'm like, whoa, I got out. I was like, awesome. I'm thinking this in my head. I was like, yes. It was like, for me, it was like a great escape. It was like Houdini, yes. I made it. And then I kind of stumbled forward, and the 2 guys were staring at me, because they both went over there to try to watch me get out of this thing. They're standing beside each other, here goes the show. Watch what he does. And they're watching me struggle with this thing. And I'm like, I can get out. And I stumbled forward, and then I honestly do not remember which one it was, but one of them looked at me and he's like, "Oh man," and he kind of flung his arm out, like whatever, Right. And the other one looked at there and he's like, yeah, whatever, they're both like, whatever, and they go back over there and sit down, and I'm just looking at them like, you mother humpers, Yeah. I was like, that is wrong, Yeah. And I was like, I'm looking at him like, man, that was messed up. Of course, I didn't say anything to them. They're a rank above me. I can't sit there and, chew their backsides or anything.
Right.
So I just went over and sat beside him, and I'm just like, man, that's messed up. I just kind of go over there and sit beside him. So they sit down across from each other because they literally bunk right next to each other.
Right.
And so they're sitting there. They both sit down. They're facing each other. Kind of like knee to knee. You got about a foot of space in between them. And they're like, yeah, so this one time, Corporal Toby Page, he starts telling the story. He goes like, yeah, man, the last time I came back from CAX, where we're Combined Arm Exercise, which for him, Toby Page, he was an S1 administration officer. And, well, I don't want to say officer, but that's what it really is. But he wasn't an officer. Like I said, he was enlisted. But that was his title.
All right.
And administration, they just make sure that your wills and powers of attorneys and, your everything else that any kind of paperwork that you have is taken care of. So those guys, when we're back at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, they don't go out in the field. They stay right there. So, I mean, the only time they ever go out into the field is when we have to pack up everything and leave, like combined arm exercise.
All right.
And so that's the only time he ever goes to the field. So he's like, yeah, the last time I came back from combined arm exercise, my girl was, supposed to meet me out at Club 108, and I went sliding across the floor. I was wearing a tuxedo and some bear shoes. And I'm like, bear shoes? What are you talking about, bear shoes? Like the slippers, the kind with the little toes on them, like the claws. And we're like, you wore bear slippers with a tuxedo? And he's like, we're like looking at him like, what's wrong with you? We're looking at him like, what are you thinking? Of course, I've heard this story before, so I'm just kind of like sitting there being quiet, listening to it. It's like same story, the only story he has, So he's like, and I slid across the dance floor and gave her a dozen roses. And we're like, oh man, that's just like super corny, Tom Cruise. We're like, you know what I'm saying? You don't see him where Tom Cruise slides out there in his underwear and the socks, I can't remember the name of the movie. I think it's like Easy Money or something like that. Yeah. But, it's like the most famous scene he's got. But anyway, he's telling his story, and I'm listening to it, and he takes about 5 minutes to tell the story. I know it's a rather short story. So, I'm kind of like waiting for all the highlights and looking at him. And then Corporal Lake, I guess he had heard it too before. So he's just sitting there listening to it, same as me, only he's nagging him because as soon as he begins his story, and like I said, I kind of like mashed up the story in like 10 seconds,
Yeah.
But, that's the highlights. That was all the main points, But he, as he begins telling his story, he reaches under his cot. He pulls out a brown paper bag. It's rolled down, and he unrolls it. And inside of it is a white APs bag. I'm kind of curious. I'm like, well, I wonder what he has inside there. I kind of like lean forward and take a look. And he's got like everything. This guy was like, no kidding. He worked out in the gym like 3 hours a day. Right. So, this guy was ripped up. He was like probably 4 or 5% body fat.
Right.
Just as strong as an ox. And, but he's not that big. He's only like 5'8", 5'9".
Right.
And had a little bit of acne thing going. So, if he had cleared that up, he wouldn't be that bad looking of a guy. But,
Yeah.
But, the strength, he was just like, you'd look at him and you'd think to yourself, he's one of those 24-hour fitness trainers. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. You walk in the door, they're on you, Come here, fat boy, let me show you how to do 1,000 push-ups.
I need me one of those.
Yeah. So, he unrolls the bag, and you would not expect this from him. You know what I'm saying? But I looked forward, leaned up there. There was like 3 or 4 Gatorades, and the rest of it was all junk food. Just Twinkies, Zingers, Ho-Hos, snack cakes. You just looked inside the bag, and you went, what the heck are you eating? It's just a sugar overload.
Yeah.
And I looked down inside the bag, and I was like, I would not have guessed that in a million years. I would like guess like protein bars, whey, and all this stuff that they try to, But no, he's got, fat pills. Like a ton of fat pills. And I look inside there, and he grabs this, the one called Ho-Hos, and he opens it up like Little Debbie Ho-Hos. He opens it up. There's 2 of them I think 2 or 3 of them in the bag. I can't remember off the top of my head how many it is, but he said, and I think that in that time, there were like 3 in the bag, but now it's like 2. You open it up. Of course, all these companies, they downsized everything. It used to be a 12-ounce can. Now it's an 8-ounce can.
Right.
Same price. But I think back in that day, it was 3 in a bag. So he pulls it out, and he begins munching on this while he's telling his story. And Corporal Laycock was like, hey, man, give me my $10 back. And he's like, yeah. And pulls and, whips out the $10 out of his pocket and like, here. And he's like, hey, while you're in the mood of giving, why don't you give me one of those ho-hos? He's like, no way, man. And he's like eating his ho-ho, telling his story. And, and Corporal Page is just becomes this maniacal, pestering, you just look at him and you just want to just reach out and choke him. Because every 30 seconds you want, can I have a bite? Can I have one? How about now? And he's literally doing that every 30 seconds. He's like going, yeah, okay. Can I have a bite now? The whole time, the whole 5 minutes he's doing that. And I'm just looking at him like, what's wrong with you? And he, towards the end, he's like, if I give you this one, will you just shut up? And he's like, yes. And so he gives him one. So he starts eating his, Corporal Laycock starts eating his ho-ho. So he's down to the, licking his finger down to the last bite. And 3 times while he's telling this story, he leans to the right. Of course, like I said, they're almost knee to knee. And I'm sitting beside Corporal Laycock. He leans over and looks me right in the face. And then straightens back up and starts telling the story. And then he leans back over to the right again and kind of looks. He's looking at me and right in the face. I'm like, what the heck is this? What are you doing? And the third time he leans over and looks me right in the face. And I was almost ready to say, what are you doing, dude? Why do you keep looking me in the face?
Yeah.
And he leans over the third time and he finishes the story and he leans over the third time and he doesn't even skip a beat. He goes, I don't think he's playing. And I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? We're the only 3 in the room, So I turn to the inside to see what's behind me because he's looking, obviously, I guess, behind me,
All right.
And Corporal Laycock turns in towards me and then looks towards the back. We both kind of like turn inboard and we're looking back and we're like, I'm looking at myself hanging from the noose and I'm like, what the heck? And I stand up. And I start walking over, because I didn't have my glasses on. I can't really, see that well without my glasses. I don't have my glasses on, so I turn around and I'm looking at myself hanging from the noose, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, that can't be me. And I'm scared, so I stand up and I walk about 10 steps and I look at myself and I'm like, no, it's me. From that far distance, I was like probably about my body was hanging in that noose about 30 feet away, and that's the first time that I realized that I was dead.
My goodness.
It was like the whole time I was sitting there for that 5 minutes listening to him drone on about, Club 108 and Slide Across the Dance Floor. That whole time, they didn't even know I was there. They didn't know I was sitting beside him. They could not see me, could not hear me. And not that I was talking anyway.
Right.
But even if they had tried, I was a ghost.
Right.
I was a spirit. I was a disembodied spirit.
Yeah, that was the first part of the story that was just so incredible how that all happened, where you gave it that last pull and then something turned loose. And I assumed it was the noose. You got out of it and you went over and sat down. But your body turned loose of your spirit.
Yes, that was something that gave way. I thought it was a noose too. The only thing that I thought was strange is those little kids, you stick your head in the weirdest places. You know what I'm saying? They're like, here's the rails of the stairs. Let me see if I can fit my head in between them.
Right.
And you do it, and you're like, yeah, I did it. And then you try to pull out, and your ears catch.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then you realize you're stuck.
Right.
And so it's either call for help or pull as hard as you can out. But you rack your ears every time, and your ears just turn beet red.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And start burning. And that was the only thing that caught my attention with that was my ears weren't burning. Well, like I said, that something that had popped loose was me. It wasn't my head from the news. It was my spirit from my body. And like I said, I stumbled forward. And remember, like I said, before I had closed my eyes, gritted my teeth, so my eyes were closed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then when I stumbled forward, I was stumbling forward out of my body. And then my body behind me had just dropped like a sack of potatoes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that's when they went, they were like, whatever. You know, the first thought process right now is how can I be in two places at one time?
Right.
You know, because I really stopped. I stopped. When that thought hit me, I stopped and looked down at myself. I was still in my black boots, my camouflage. This was before they switched to digital, okay?
Right.
Like I said, this was back in 1994. I was still wearing my black boots. You know, I was still wearing my camouflage utilities, my brown web belt, and my green shirt. I even pulled my dog tags out to look at them.
Yeah.
I still had on everything.
Yeah, that's amazing right there, for sure. How you would come out of your body, but you came out, everything that you had on actually, yeah, that's quite incredible. We talked about that yesterday. I thought that was amazing.
But like I said, I pulled my dog tags out, and as I'm looking at my dog tags dangling from my fist, all of a sudden I just let go because I noticed something different about my hand. And this is the only way I can describe it. You can see in your spiritual form, your spiritual body is exactly like the physical body, minus one thing.
Okay.
If you stare hard enough, you can see through yourself.
Wow.
And that's the only way I can put it. It's not like when you first look at yourself, you don't notice that you're translucent,
right?
That you're opaque, or whatever, however you want to say it. That you're like a window, you know.
Right.
It's like a very dirty window. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like a window with dust all over it. You know what I'm saying? You can see through it, but the first thing that you see is the dust.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Wow. Incredible.
You know what I'm saying? So the first thing I saw when I looked at myself was just my skin, my hair on the back of my hands, just the regular old me. Right. You know what I'm saying? But I realized if I stared hard enough, you could see through it. And you kind of brought this up the other night when we were talking, and I want to throw it back on you.
All right.
You know how sometimes you can take a flashlight and put it in your mouth and your cheeks glow?
Right.
Or you can put it beneath your hand and you see your hand glowing?
Correct, yeah.
That kind of thing?
Right.
That's kind of what it's like. You see what I'm saying?
Right,
it's like if you stare hard enough, you can see through it.
Right.
And so I was just like, oh, geez. And that's when I was sure, 100% sure, that I was dead.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's when it really sunk in for me, because you know, somebody might be behind me could be somebody else. You know, there's a lot of Marines that look like me. You know, so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm trying to play off every other option except for the one I don't want to hear, which is I'm dead and I'm out of my body.
Yeah. My goodness.
You know, so like I said, I dropped the dog tags, and I'm looking at my hand, and I steered hard enough, and I was able to see the sand on the ground. And I'm like, oh, geez. And then Corporal Laycock walks up, and he kneels down right beside me. And the funny thing is that never once, and this is something that I just thought about now, never once while I was out of my body did anybody ever try to walk through me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He literally walked up and knelt right beside me. Right. He didn't walk up to where I was standing and then kneel down. I mean, it's like, I I don't want to say that it was scripted by God.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or that maybe we have some kind of sixth sense that tells us where to stand and where to go so that we're not running into other entities. You know what I'm saying? Or trying to walk through them or sit where they're sitting or stand where they're standing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that exists, but that's what happened.
Well, there's similar things when I collect all these stories. Sometimes I collect stories that are on the negative entity side and things like that. And people, before they ever even see whatever it is, whether it be a devil type thing or this dog man creature or whatever, they feel that something's watching them, or they have a sense that something is stalking them. They get a feeling that they're in danger. So I could see there being something like that, a sense that we have that we're not really aware of. It's kind of an automatic type thing. You know, people wake up at night and sense that there's something in the room, you know, that kind of stuff. So I completely agree that there's something like that, maybe even further, more than we understand, that might be involved. Yeah. So at this point, they're, you know, they're analyzing and looking at you. So what happens from there? Right.
And then all of a sudden, Corporal Laycock out of the blue just walks up, kneels down beside me. He goes, "Now that's a good picture," and he takes the picture.
Oh my goodness! Do you have that picture?
He does.
Oh man, I would sure like to see that and put it on for the thumbnail. You know, well, maybe you might not want that, but my goodness, I'd like to see it anyway.
Well, I can't imagine that he threw it away.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is the time that he killed one of the biggest, strongest Marines he knew. You know?
Right. Yeah. My goodness. Wow.
You know, for him, which would be quite an accomplishment, because, you know, this guy, he was probably about 5'10", you know, brown hair, blue eyes, and really thick glasses, and probably weighed about 100 pounds with a soaking wet flat jacket on.
Right. Right.
You know, probably weighed about 100 pounds. I mean, this guy was just like pencil thin, you know.
Right.
But anyway, he walks up and he kneels down beside me. He goes, "Now that's a good picture," and he takes the picture. And then Corporal Page walks up to his left, looks down at his face. Man, this guy had, like I said, he may have acne going on, but he had really good eyesight. And he looks at him and he said the same exact thing that I was thinking. He looked at him and he goes, "Dude, are you friggin' retarded?" He goes, "Look at him. He's dead. His eyelids are blue. His nose is blue. His ears are blue. He has drool hanging out of his mouth all the way to the ground." He's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he stands back up. He takes like 5 steps forward until he's like 10 feet from my body. You know, 8 to 10 feet from my body. And then he goes, "Oh, bleep." And he, you know, I'm bleeping it out myself, so you don't have to. You know? And he throws the camera over his shoulder towards his rack. And then runs forward, grabs my body around the waist, and picks up. And he's training for all that he's worth. Like I said, I was almost 200 pounds at that time. I was like 190, 185, 190 pounds. Right. At that time, and he's like 100 pounds, and he's lifting nearly twice his body weight, you know, dead body weight, literally.
Right.
And he's picking up, and immediately his face turned beet red, like a tomato, because he's straining with all these words, you know. Right. And he looks, he kind of like flops my head over to the other side, because my head was kind of like, you know, like pushing against his body. He kind of like flops my head to the other side so he can make face contact with the other, you know, corporal. And he goes, you know, like, "Freaking retard, get over here and get this noose off his neck." You know? Right. And so Corporal Page runs over there. And he grabs a hold of the noose, and he's trying to pull on it. But he had to do the same thing I did. He tried to stick a finger in there, and his finger's not enough.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And this is the part that may be new for you.
Okay.
I tried this. I literally tried this. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I'm going to try to hop back in my body and stand up.
Right.
And I tried that. I literally walked forward, and as soon as in my body, I'm facing towards myself, like face to face.
All right.
So I don't know if this had anything to do with it or what, but I tried to get into my body, thinking, okay, if I just kind of like jump into it, you know what I'm saying, or walk into myself, that my body will automatically realign itself. You know what I'm saying? Like you see in all the movies.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. You know? When I tried to step into my body, like I said, my spiritual self tried to step into my physical body. When I tried to do that, it was like somebody had pulled the battery out of me. Or another way of looking at it would be like somebody had slugged me as hard as they could possibly have slugged me. You know, I'm talking about a very big dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like when I stepped forward and tried to enter my body, I immediately almost fell down and backwards. I literally kind of like went into a squatting position and stumbled backwards out of myself. And completely drained of energy. It's almost like somebody that had just, you know, gave me a shot in the kidneys. I don't know if you've ever been hit in the kidneys before, but other than pee and blood, that's what it does to you. It just immediately just drains you of all energy that you have.
Right.
And that's how I felt. It felt like somebody had literally pulled the plug on me. Like literally drained me of every bit of energy that I had. And I literally kind of like almost fell down and kind of caught myself. You know what I'm saying? And then stumbled backwards. And I'm like, whoa! And I'm kind of like leaning over like, oh my goodness, what the heck was that? So anyway, I'm just sitting there bent over trying to regain my strength, you know, and I'm just like, look at them struggling with my body. And then I see Corporal Page, like I said, he's stuck that one finger in there and he's pulling it. He's turning colors now too. And only he's not kind of turning red, he's kind of like turning the blue. Like a purplish blue color. So he's struggling with the thing and it's not moving. He's like, oh! Like I said, this guy works out in the gym 3 hours a day. And while I'm looking at them, I think to myself, this should be backwards. The big guy should be holding me up, and the little guy should be trying to get the noose off my neck.
Right.
But thank God it wasn't that way, because if it was that way, they would have never got me out. Because it took everything that Corporal Lakex had just to hold me up. And it took everything that Corporal Page had, and he's the one that works out. Like I said, like 185 pounds, ripped up 4% body fat. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just monster of a guy. I mean, just ripped up, strong. You know?
Yeah, the kind of noose that it is, the kind of rope that it is, it's just really hard to get loose, isn't it?
Well, not just that, but because it goes down, the knot goes down through all those 13 loops. And then goes around the neck, off to the side, around the neck, and then back up through.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the ropes are side by side. If there's no one there to be hung from there, you can literally pull those ropes up and it'll just unravel. You see what I'm saying? Because those knots need something. The loop that wraps around the neck needs something to hold it inside those loops. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah.
But it's also in an L shape. It comes down to the top, makes a left, goes out and around. And if you don't straighten that out, that L shape, if you don't make it straight, you're not pulling it loose.
Okay, all right.
And that's why they make that kind of a knot, because nobody can cock their neck over to the side while being hung and pull themselves out from it.
Right.
You don't escape from a 13-knot noose. You don't get out of it. Even if you were able to climb, like grab the rope and climb to the limb that you're being hung from, it's still around your neck and choking you.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't escape from that.
Right.
And so, I mean, he kind of like flops my head off to the side. He goes, "Straighten out the knot, stupid." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Straighten it out, make it straight." And I guess he kind of figured out what he meant, because he kind of like, he goes, "Oh," and he's like, he pulls my, you know, my head in a weird way. I'm like, he's gonna break my neck, you know.
Right. Right.
He like pulls my head over in a weird way, and then he grabs two fingers inside there, and then he strains for all he's worth. And on his last strain, his last bit of strength, he was able to move it 1 inch.
Wow.
But that was enough to get all the other fingers in there. And then with whatever strength that he had left, which was practically zero, you know, it was down to nothing, he pulled one last time, but he could tell he was done. Even before he pulled, he was like zapped of all, you know, strength.
Right.
And he's pulling like, ugh. And it just slides another like 2 or 3 inches, and that was enough for them to get it off my neck.
Wow.
You know, so they get the noose off my neck, and I'm standing there watching them. Like I said, by this time, I'm kind of like standing, you know, getting ready to stand back up straight, because, like I said, I was, you know, it was like a huge sense of vertigo, like someone had just slammed me from out of nowhere. And like I said, I kind of like went down to the squat position, kind of fell backwards, you know, stumbled backwards. And I'm just standing there, like I said, in the baseball position, looking up at them as they're struggling with my body. But they finally got my you know, the knot, the noose off, and then they dragged my body over there, and they threw it on my cot. You know, they knew where I was sleeping. I was only like 8 down from them, you know, and they threw my body on the cot. And immediately, Corporal Page, he's freaking out. He's like pacing around like I am right now in this room. He's pacing around, and he's like, "Oh my God, dude, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? We gotta think of something. We gotta, you know." And Corporal Laycock's over there. You can tell his brain's doing 90 to nothing, which is a dangerous thing, because, like I said, this guy was super smart. If I had to guess, he probably had about 180 IQ. I mean, just ridiculously smart. He was one of those guys that you could throw on Jeopardy, and he'd probably win.
Right.
You know. But he's sitting there, and you can tell his brain is just, it's almost like you could almost see smoke come out of his ears, because his brain is going like 1,000 miles per hour, trying to come up with something. A reasonable explanation for why they, or how I had gotten killed. You know?
Right.
And you can see his brain's going. It's going. And the other one's just walking around freaking out. And I mean, he literally has his arms wrapped across his chest, and his chin resting in the knot of his hand. You know? And he's like, "Shut up, I'm thinking." And he rests his, you know, hand back into the ball of his, you know, fist, and he's thinking. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it was a bad idea to try to get into my body while it was moving. I mean, that was just a bad idea. But now that my body's still, I probably won't have that same sense of vertigo or feeling like I've been, you know, just got sapped of all energy. You know, so I'm like, okay, well, this is my chance. I'll just lay back down into my body and then sit back up. Like the dumbest thought in the world, you know?
Uh-huh.
And, but I say at the same time, the most natural. When you're out of your body, you want to get back in it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When something's wrong, you want to fix it. That's kind of how guys are. When something's wrong, we want to fix it. We don't want to analyze it. We just want to get it better.
Right.
You know?
Right. And they never did start any CPR. They never did start any CPR or anything like that, did they?
No, because like I said, I've been hanging for that noose for 5 minutes. I mean, most people who have drowned and been without oxygen for 2 minutes have been vegetables.
Right. Okay. So
You know what I'm saying? Even if they were able to resuscitate them after 2 minutes of being drowned in the pool, that's it. You're done. You're like a 40 IQ. You could be like buddy with the plant next to you.
okay. So you basically go over and you think you're going to just sit down on your cot and lay down into your body.
Yes, that was my thought. I'm like, okay, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but right now I can get it right. So I said, okay, that's what exactly what I'm going to do. Just what you said. I'm going to sit down into my body. So I turned the right direction since my back was laying on the thing and I'm face up. Since my body is face up on the cot, I'm like, okay. I walked over to the edge of the bed and I literally put my left foot inside my left foot, right foot inside my right foot, sat down, and nothing happened that was bad so far. I'm like, okay. I look back behind me to see how my body's laying, because now I got my leg inside my leg. I'm like half in, half out of my body. I'm cool. Nothing's going wrong.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, I got this part right. Let me look back and see how I'm laying. And I kind of try to fix myself because they had, flopped my hands across my chest. Like most people do when they're dead. They don't just let their arm dangle off. You know what I'm saying? They flop my arms across my chest. I'm like, okay, so I'm like, look back and I'm like, okay, let me get this right. Which arm is high, which one's low? Which direction is my head hanging? Because my head was kind of tilted out to the side. I'm like, okay, my head's tilted out to the right. Left arm high, right arm low. Okay, I'm good. Lean back. And as I lean back into my body, I had my eyes open this time. Like I said, when I fell out of my body, I had my eyes closed. When I went back into my body, I had my eyes open.
Right.
And as soon as my head laid down into my head, I expected to just pop right back up. And be like, what's up, dudes?
Yeah.
Hi, gotcha, kind of thing,
Okay.
But, once again, one of those stupid thoughts, because you'll see why in a minute. But as soon as my head laid down inside my head, and I was fully in my body, I was instantaneously, faster than you can blink, standing back up. And I'm in a completely empty void. And this is, I know you hear the words, but you can't imagine it. And the reason why you can't imagine it is because all your life, even when you came out of your mother's womb, there were things around you. There were people, walls, doors, doctors, people, the things. But now imagine everything, and I mean everything, all of it, gone. And I'm looking out into this blackness, this, like I said, an empty void. There's nothing, absolutely nothing there. No light, no wind, no sound, nothing. And that's the first thing that hit me was I thought to myself, no, there can't be nothing. This is impossible. It's impossible. There can't be nothing.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, and then the next thought that hit me was like, well, I'm standing on something. You know what I'm saying? So I look down and I can see beneath my feet. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm standing on nothing. There's a floor beneath me. I can feel it beneath my feet. I'm standing on it. Hard as concrete. You know what I'm saying? But I can't see it.
Wow.
So I'm literally standing on nothing. And the only way I can liken this is to say, imagine yourself in a giant warehouse. The lights are off. And the ceiling's 50 foot above you. Now imagine yourself standing 25 foot up, like somewhere in the middle of the floor and the ceiling. And you're standing on top of a glass. And they turn off the lights. You see what I'm saying? Right. And then you look down and you're able to see beneath you, but at the same time, imagine that whatever light causes no reflection on the glass.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what it was like. I was like standing in a giant warehouse. Above you, there's darkness. Beneath you, there's darkness. In front of you, there's darkness. To the left and right, there's darkness. And there's just emptiness. Nothing.
Dude.
But imagine that warehouse stretching on forever. You know what I'm saying? To where you can't even make out a wall in the distance. You know what I'm saying? That's what it was like. And I'm like, you know, like I said, I even looked down and I said, the next thought that came to me was I'm standing on something. So I looked down. And then I'm like, okay, I can't see what I'm standing on. And I'm like, okay, well, the next thought was, well, if there's a floor beneath me, even though I can't see it, I can feel it, maybe there's a ceiling above me. And so I look up, and even though I can't see what's beneath me, I know that it's there because I'm standing on it, you know. Right. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe there's a ceiling above me that I can't see, and I'm going to try to reach up and touch it. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I literally look up, and I go to reach my hand up, and my hand is extending, and probably when it gets about 3 inches above my head, oh, this is going to get weird. It's already weird. When my hand is about 3 inches above my head, my consciousness expanded, and that's the only way I can describe it. My consciousness expanded, and it touched the ceiling even before my hand would have gotten there. But my hand wouldn't have gotten there because the ceiling is like 14 feet up. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Wow.
You know, and it's like even in your house right now, if you can't extend your hand up, say like you're a shorter person, and you can't touch the ceiling, you can still see it with your eyes. Right. And you know for 100% sure that it's there. You don't need to touch it to know that it's there. You're looking at it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, you may have never touched the ceiling in your own house in your entire life, but you know that it's there.
All right.
You know what I'm saying?
So how far do you think so how far do you think it was to the ceiling in this outer nothing?
About 14 feet.
Okay.
It was 14 feet from ground to ceiling.
From where you were standing, the nothingness to the
from nothingness to nothingness, from floor to ceiling, 14 feet.
Do you think there really was something 14 feet there, or was it something like you were standing on, something you wouldn't be able to see anyway?
It was something that I couldn't see.
Okay.
And it was exactly like what I was standing on, but it was 14 feet up.
Okay.
Okay. So floor, roof. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And when my consciousness expanded and touched it, it was the same as your eyes seeing your own ceiling. You don't need to touch it to know that it's there because you see it.
Okay.
And for me, I didn't need to touch it with my hand because I'd already felt it. And I knew for 100% sure, 100%, there's no way that you could say this is my imagination or anything. I knew for 100% sure that there was a ceiling, and it was up there roughly about 14 feet above my head. Wow. Or 14 feet from floor to floor.
Okay.
Plane to plane. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay. And when like I said, I had my hand about 3 inches above my head when my consciousness expanded and touched it. And I knew that it was there before if I had extended my arm up, I would have touched nothing because it's so high up there.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But at that point, I didn't need to touch it because I knew for 100% sure that it was there. And it shocked me. It was like I was blown away by it. It actually, caused a physical reaction. I jerked my hand back down like, what the heck was that? Like, almost like I'd been stung.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? And I pulled my hand back down and I'm holding it like in a fist, near my heart. I'm like, whoa, that right there had blown me away. Oh, and you did ask a question. that I want to answer. You asked me at any point did I get scared.
Right.
At that point, I'm just going to kind of regress just a little bit. At the point to where it felt like I had gotten socked and kind of like battery drained and kind of fell backwards and stumbled backwards a little bit out of my body the first time I tried to step into it. That's when I became concerned. I was like, whoa, this isn't good. You know, that was the first time that I actually had a striking emotion that I could remember other than just being like, what the heck's going on? You know?
Right.
But even in this place, even though I was in this place, I still wasn't scared.
Okay.
Okay, the point that I became concerned while I was out of my body and with my friends was at that point. Now, at this point, I'm about to become concerned again. I'm not really afraid, just worried, concerned. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I had pulled my head back down, and I was completely blown away by it. There being a ceiling above me that I can't see, I can't physically touch, but yet know with a surety that it's there. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, whoa. And okay, and then the next thought process was this. Okay, there's the floor. There's the ceiling. Even though I can't see either one, I can touch the one I'm standing on, but I can't touch that one up there, but I know that it's there. And I think to myself, ceilings don't hold themselves up. Walls hold up a ceiling. And if there's a ceiling and there's a floor, there's got to be a wall, which means there's a door, there's a window, there's a way out. That was my next thought process.
Right.
And all I have to do is just go find it to get out of this place. I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got there. You know what I'm saying? I'm just there. Right. You know? And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm going to find a way out. You know?
Right.
And I thought to myself, okay, I kind of look around and I'm in this empty black void. And I thought, well, you know, and I don't want to make this corny or anything. You know what I'm saying? Because this was a real thing that happened to me. But you know how in Star Trek, when, you know, they're like, okay, which way, Captain? He just goes, that way. You know, he kind of like flippantly points in that direction.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter that way.
Right.
You know, that's how I felt because I'm in this black, empty void. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, any direction to walk is a good direction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just walking the direction that I'm facing because it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You know, I'm eventually going to find a wall. And if I find a wall, I'm going to go along that wall until I find a door or a window or a way out.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk in this direction. And then another jaw-dropping experience happened to me. Remember how I said I reached up and my consciousness kind of expanded and touched the ceiling above me?
Right.
The same kind of thing happened, only it wasn't my conscience. It was my body. And the only way I can liken it to where anybody can understand is like this. If you take a rubber band, it's a nice little loop, you cut it with a pair of scissors until it's a string. It has a certain distance to it. Say it's like 5 inches long.
Right.
Okay? Now you can take that rubber band, hold it in one hand near your chest, grab the other end, and then stretch it out 2 feet. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, did the rubber band really become longer? Did it gain more mass? You know what I'm saying? No, it just stretched. Right. The same amount of mass, the same amount of everything exists. The only thing it's doing is stretching and it's getting thinner. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it definitely is longer. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's what happened to my body. As soon as I said, okay, I'm going to go this direction, and I picked up my foot and I began to focus in on that direction, like I'm going to go that way. As soon as I picked up my foot and began to swing it forward, my body stretched. It was like my back foot was standing where it was, and then all of a sudden, I began to go forward, stretching out like a rubber band.
Wow.
And like I said, my back foot never left from where it was. My body just began to stretch out like a rubber band. And I'm moving forward at a very rapid speed. Like, I could have covered a full football field in like a second or two. You know what I'm saying? And I stretched out 1 football field, 2 football fields, almost 3 football fields. And then all of a sudden, I came to a realization as I'm stretching out and freaking out all at the same time. You know, because I don't know what's happening to me. All I know is I began to step in this direction. All of a sudden, I stretch. I just began to stretch. And my consciousness and my body is going with it. You know? And I probably stretched out about 2 or 3 football fields in length. And then finally the thought came to me, while this is happening all at one time, there is no escape. You're standing in between 2 parallel planes. There is no wall. There's no door. There's no window. There's no way out. See, that thought didn't come to me while I was standing there. That thought never even processed. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking to myself, okay. You know, the first time I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, there is a ceiling up there. And ceilings don't hold themselves up. That's not natural. That's not normal. You know?
Right.
But then when that thought came to me, you know, you're standing in between 2 parallel planes. And it was almost like, well, then why am I even trying to go any direction? You know what I'm saying? So I pulled my foot back and I set it down, and I never left from where I was.
Do you think if you was to have picked your other foot up, you think you could have took that step?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty darn sure that if my foot had actually hit the ground, that I could have put my back foot up and just set it down, and I would have been like 3 football fields away in like 2 seconds.
Wow.
Or maybe even less. I don't even really know how time works in this place. You know what I'm saying? Or if there is such a thing as time, if time even exists.
Right. I don't think.
You know, if time doesn't exist, then why can't you travel like that? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I've talked about this.
Because distance is always relegated off to your speed, right?
Right.
But if there is no time, then distance doesn't matter. Speed doesn't matter. You could probably even think yourself into that next position if you wanted to. You could probably just think, I want to be there, and you could be there. I never thought about that before. I just thought about it now, but I'm just thinking, why couldn't you do that?
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. For sure.
You know? But I pulled my foot back down. I pulled my foot back, and I set it down. So I kind of like went from stretching to like the same thing as if you just let a rubber band go. It just snaps back. And that's what my body and my consciousness did. It just snapped back. And that's when I became concerned. As soon as I put my foot down and realized there was no escape, that's when I'm like, oh, man.
Wow.
Yeah, I was bummed, you know. And then as soon as I put my foot back down, and apparently I had attracted the attention of something, because as soon as I put my foot back down, I got snatched up off my feet. And I mean, it was the only way I can liken this to like this. Imagine an electric bus. You know, they actually make electric buses in China. But you've always seen in the movies where somebody gets nailed by a bus. It's, you know, it's the comedy hallmark of almost every good comedy now. It came up behind me so fast that I had no clue that it was even coming. It's like I just pulled my foot back down, you know, and went, oh, man, and then bam, before I can even have another thought other than exasperation, other than concern, I got picked up off my feet by a 13-foot tall demon.
Wow.
And for me, I didn't even know what the heck had happened. All I know is 1 minute I'm standing there, the next minute I'm jerked up off my feet, and I felt that. This thing came up behind me so fast and just snatched me off my feet with such force that it was like being struck by a bus. And 1 minute I'm standing there, the next minute I'm off my feet, and I'm looking out into this nothing, and I can see my feet are popping, like almost like I'm swimming. My feet are just popping, but I'm, like I said, in a lean back, like a lawn chair position. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where you lean back and your feet are up. And my feet are popping. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if it was like, when you stick a rag out of the window, when you're doing like 55 miles an hour, it pops. You know what I'm saying? When you see a flag waving in the wind, it pops. And that's what my feet were doing. So I don't know if it was literally from the sheer amount of pain that I was experiencing, like a convulsion or a spasm or whatever, if my feet were just popping because of that. You know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
Or if it was like my feet are popping in the wind because we're going so fast. And we were moving. If I had to liken it to anything, I would probably say we were moving in between 80 and 120.
Wow.
80 and 120 miles an hour. This thing just picked me up and began running with me, and we're just moving. You know what I'm saying?
No.
So I literally, honestly don't know that if my feet are just like popping in the wind or if I'm convulsing, from the sheer amount of pain that I was in. And to describe the pain to you, because this needs to be understood to understand why my feet are popping. And I'm pretty sure it's from the pain. When you're in your body, like you are now, like I am now, if I sneak up behind you, or even if I just walk up behind you, and I was like, okay, we're going to do an experiment, and I take a needle, and I poke you in the left shoulder with it, you don't even need to be seeing it to know what shoulder I poked you at. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because you have pain receptors in your body that tell you you've been poked right here. You know what I'm saying? If I poked you in the back of the leg,
right.
like right behind your right knee, you'd be like, ow, I got just poked behind the right knee. You have pain receptors. Your spirit body does not have pain receptors. Okay? You don't have nerves. Your spiritual body is made a little bit differently. You don't have blood, so you can't die. You know what I'm saying? You don't have nerves. You don't have veins. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because otherwise, you would be able to die. That's what your body has. So, for pain, if I walked up behind you in the spirit body and I slugged you in the back, you would feel it everywhere in your body. The same way that electricity runs through your body, like you've ever been playing with the outlet, got zapped.
Yeah.
Okay? And the electricity runs through your entire body from your head to your toe. That's what pain is like in the spiritual body, because there are no pain receptors. You see what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
So when this thing had snuck up behind me and grabbed me by my left shoulder and jerked me up off the ground, pain was running through my entire body from head to toe. It was like being electrified, only worse.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I can describe it. The only thing I can liken it to that anyone would understand. The amount of pain that I was in. And as this pain is running through my body, it's so much pain that it was even hard to think. But I can feel this pounding sensation, like if you hit your thumb with a hammer. and then all of a sudden, you grab hold of your thumb and you're just squeezing it, and all of a sudden you feel like whoop, 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 whoop. You can feel your heartbeat through your thumb.
Yeah.
It was like that. Okay? That's the only thing I can liken it to once again. Okay? But I can feel this pounding sensation, this hurting, aching sensation coming from my left shoulder. So I'm above my feet. I'm watching my feet being popped in the wind. It's so hard to think because there's this huge amount of pain running through my body. But I can feel this pounding sensation coming from my left shoulder. So I kind of look down and to the left. I'm trying to look left, but I can't really because this thing's hand is so thick. So it's like a 4x4 post sitting on my shoulder, and you can't move your head left because this thing is just there. So I kind of look down and to the left. I'm straining my eyes to look out the corner of my vision to see what's on my left side that's bringing me such pain. It wasn't a direct pain, like a pinpoint pain. It was just like you're being crushed on your left side. And this throbbing sensation is coming from my left side. So I'm like, oh. And I kind of look down and off to the left, and I'm like, oh, my God. And there's this huge hand. I can see these fingertips running down to right below my chest. So I can see how big the fingers are. I mean, the fingers, they're probably like 3 human fingers put together and about 8 inches long, 10 inches long. Where our fingers are like 3 or 4 inches long, it's like 8 inches long. Or 10 inches long. I mean, just a huge freaking hand that has me by the left shoulder. And I'm just in this, huge amount of pain, and even I'm like being drained of all energy, and I'm just like, it's hard to think, and I'm like, look down to my left, and I'm like, oh, geez, what is this? And I see these black and red fingers. And once again, I always describe it the same way. It was either red fingers, like red skin, with black shadows moving across it, or it was red skin with like a black, cloudy, oily substance like a cloud moving beneath the skin. All I know is it's red and black. And it's huge. This hand is huge, and it's crushing me. It's crushing my left shoulder. And I kind of I'm like, what has a hold of me? And that was my next thought, that I could get through this pain. What has a hold of me? And I kind of looked over my right shoulder to see what's there. Now, this thing had grabbed me with its left arm on my left shoulder and was dragging me behind it. And it had a hold of me, and I understand this in retrospect, and I'm pretty sure of it. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty darn sure that it could hear my thoughts as if I had said them out loud, because when I thought to myself, what has a hold of me, and then looked over my right shoulder, it was already looking back at me, waiting for me to look at it.
Wow.
So it's running in this direction. It's looking back at me like a football player that's, looking for the person behind him who's trying to tackle him, and he's trying to straight arm to get away from him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You always see that pose in the Heisman Trophy where he kind of got his arm stretched out and looking back over his shoulder behind him. That's the pose this thing was in. It had me by my shoulder. It was looking back at me and just grinning. Like, yeah, I got you. I got you, punk. And there's nothing you can do about it. And it's looking at me and it's grinning at me. And I looked at its face for just a second. And that was all that I needed to see. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to see it no more. And to me, it was just I've seen a ton of horror movies. You know what I'm saying? Where they try to make it uglier and uglier and uglier every time they, put out a horror movie.
Right.
Yeah.
But
for me, looking this demon face to face, and seeing it, it was just the ugliest thing for me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Even though in retrospect, I mean, you don't want to be, that's the last thing you want, is to be, is to be picked by a 13-foot tall demon who's built like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, just ripped full of muscles, and just, it's got a hold of you. You know what I'm saying? It would be like the equivalent of a 11-foot Kodiak bear having you in its grip, of its teeth, and it's slinging you around. And at that point, you just realize there's nothing you can do. You're for lack of better words, you're screwed. You're toast. You're done. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing you can do.
Right.
And when this thing had a hold of me, and I realized that there's nothing I can do. I mean, I look like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old next to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad deal there.
Yeah. I mean, this literally no hope. So I kind of like look away from this thing, and I'll describe it for you. Not a problem. Like I said, the whole thing is red and black. Its face is red and black. Same thing as its hand. But its face was like a human. And what I mean by that is this. It has all the appendages that we have. 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. It didn't have any hair whatsoever. No eyebrows, no mustache, no goatee, no hair on its head, nothing. It was completely hairless. Red and black skin. Now, the nose. Well, let me just start from the eyes down. The eyes, where our eyes are white, it was yellow. And then you have the iris, which is any color, brown, yellow, green, whatever color we have. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've seen some beautiful green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes. You know what I'm saying? But where our eyes are round, the iris is round, it was diamond shaped. It didn't have like a normal color that you'd normally see, like green or blue or brown. It was gold, like kind of like a flaked gold, like you would see in a cat or a snake. And like I said, diamond shaped. And so it was yellow and gold, diamond shaped. And its nose was really flat and really wide. And I don't mean upturned like a pig. I mean down, like as if somebody put your finger on the top of your nose and just pushed it flat. And its nose was easily as wide as its mouth. So it had a really flat, human-like, really wide nose. And like I said, it was grinning at me, and it had the most pristine, beautiful, white, sparkling teeth that you could ever imagine. Every time you see one of those, toothpaste commercials, where their just teeth are ridiculously white,
right.
That's how white its teeth were. Now, the only difference between its teeth and ours is where our canines are, where our teeth goes from kind of being like flat to kind of being like werewolf or vampire, where they go into canines.
Right.
It had 2 tusks coming out of its bottom lip, where our canines are. It had 2 tusks, kind of like the orc or whatever you see in Warcraft. 2 giant tusks coming out of its mouth, and just kind of like resting on its top lip. And it was just grinning at me, smiling, like, hi, I got you. And like I said, this thing was, it was built like a bodybuilder. Just huge, muscular. I don't mean just big, like 13 feet tall and skinny. No, it was built like Lou Ferrigno, Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. Just huge, hulking, I don't even want to say the Incredible Hulk, but that's kind of what it was like. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to make it cartoonish because this is something that was real. You know, I don't want to make it like, okay, he's just making this stuff up now, you know. Well, most people are either going to believe or not believe, so I don't really care. Like I said, I'm a poor, broke guy. I have nothing to lose. You know, so, and it's like I'm not a preacher, I'm not an evangelist, I'm not a minister. I don't have any kind of agenda. You know, I don't have a charity or a foundation. I don't accept money. I go out there and I bust my butt and earn money. You know what I'm saying? I take care of my family. I'm not just like any other person. Okay, I just had something really weird, marvelous, strange, you know, something like that happened to me.
Right.
You know, but this thing, it gives me a nice toothy grin, and I looked away and I thought to myself, oh, man, you are screwed. You know? And as soon as I realized, you know, I'm like, oh, man, I'm done. I'm like, and then the next thought was, where's it taking me? And then the answer was placed in my head. And this is something that's weird about this place was if you wanted to know the answer to something, all you had to do was ask out loud or think it. The answer would be placed in your head almost as if you had just forgotten it, never knew. But you would, almost like you remembered it, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you never knew in the first place. But yet you knew the answer was 100% true. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Incredible.
You know, and so when the answer was placed in my head, oh, it's taking you to hell. And I'm like, hell? And it's like, yeah, you know, the fire and brimstone part? Yeah, that's where it's taking you. It's taking you to throw your sorry butt in. You know what I'm saying? And when that thought came into my head, or was placed in my head, for lack of better words, I knew that it was 100% true. I knew that that's where it was taking me. And I knew that I was lost, hopeless, and that there was no hope or opportunity of escape. I was just done, you know. And once that thought that was placed into my head, and I don't want to say I thought it. No, I didn't think it. It was placed into my head. It's taking you to hell. And I knew which part of hell that it was taking me to. Like I said, that fire and brimstone, fiery lake of fire, pit fire, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Where the souls burn for eternity, that's where it was taking me. And I knew it for 100% sure. And I was just like, oh. Bummed out doesn't even come close to describing the situation. As long as you're alive on this earth, I don't care how hopeless a situation gets. You could even be in the clutches of Kodiak. You know what I'm saying? An 11-foot Kodiak, and it could be, you know, grabbing you by the leg and slinging you around. You still have some kind of hope. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it'll drop you. Maybe it'll run off. Maybe, but you're still alive. And as long as you're alive, you have hope. But in this place, there is no hope. There's no escape. There's no getting free. You know what I'm saying? And when the answer was placed in my head, oh, that's where it's taking you? You want to know where it's taking you? It's taking you to hell. There you go. There's your answer, buddy. Wow. You thought it. There's your answer. I immediately from that point, I felt hope and emotion literally pour out of me like water pouring out of a glass.
Wow.
That's the only way I can describe it. I felt it literally start from inside the top of my head. I felt it drain down past my eyeballs, my ears, my chin, down out through my chest, you know, and it literally just poured out right out my feet. It literally left me, literally. I felt it like wind on your face. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I felt it literally start from the inside of me and just leave me. Hope just abandoned me. and I became limp. I just kind of like was like blah, like I'm done. You know what I'm saying? And my feet were still popping, and it was still taking me. It was still crushing my shoulder. Only I was feeling no pain. I was feeling, for lack of better words, hopeless. Just completely destroyed. And as it's taken me there, I began to think to myself, man, this is messed up. This is wrong. I don't belong here. I don't deserve this. And then I started trying to justify myself. I was like, well, I've never killed anyone. I never murdered anyone. I never stolen anything. I never raped anyone. Why? Why is this happening to me? Why am I getting taken to hell and thrown in? You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense. I didn't deserve it. I didn't do anything to deserve this. Not this. Because it's like, you would sit there and think to yourself, if someone murders someone, they deserve hell. You know what I'm saying? Like a random axe murderer or a pedophile or, a robber or a rapist. You would think to yourself, yeah, these people deserve hell. But then again, something that I've come to realize in my older age is God is holy. He doesn't see any difference in between a tiny white lie and the worst heinous murder. To him, sin is sin. And he can't have it in his presence, period. You know what I'm saying? And when you realize that, you realize the gravity that sin really has over us. You know what I'm saying? Why we can't be in his presence like this. Why we need Jesus. I don't mean to preach on you, but I just want you to understand, my thought process now versus my process then. But anyway, this thing, it's taking me there, and I'm trying to justify myself. I'm like, I've never done this, I've never done that. And then I kind of like hang my head down, and as I'm thinking this, that, this isn't right. I don't deserve this. I don't belong here. I saw this tiny pinpoint of light appear way, way far off in the distance. And like I said, this is two parallel planes that for me kind of seem to run on forever.
Right.
And this thing's taking me, it's running at a very fast, rapid rate, and I see this tiny little pinpoint of light, and I'm thinking, whatever it is, it's so far away and so tiny that it can't possibly help me. So I hang my head back down. I just got my attention for like a second. And then all of a sudden it moved off to the right. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did that thing just move or did we change direction? Because it got a little bit bigger. And moved off to the right and it got just a tiny bit bigger. I'm like, no, that thing, and I'm thinking to myself, no, I didn't feel like we changed direction. That thing just moved. And then all of a sudden it moved off to the left and it got just a tiny bit bigger. I'm like, what is that? And as I'm focusing in on it, it comes rushing at me, this huge, white, blinding light. But it didn't hurt your eyes. But the light this angel emitted was just so powerful and so pure white, that if it was the sun, it would have blinded you. But it didn't hurt the eyes at all. But it was just bright. I mean, just dazzling white. Wow. And it just came rushing at me so fast that it was like a bolt of lightning. If I thought I moved fast when my body's straight, it moved 10 times faster. This thing literally moved at the speed or faster than the speed of light. It was like 1 minute, it looked like it was a billion miles away, and the next minute, boom, right in my face. It just came rushing at me, just boom, there. And there's this hand reaching down to me out of this bright white light. And my hand instinctively knew what to do. My hand just jumped up there and grabbed this hand that was reaching down for it. And I liken it to not a thought motivated process, but like a reflex. When somebody goes heads up, and the ball's coming at your head, and you kind of just, your arm knows what to do before you do. Just reaches up there, grabs the ball, smack, and you know what I'm saying? You didn't think I'm going to reach up and catch this ball. Your hand knew what to do to preserve yourself.
Right.
And that's what my hand did. My hand knew what to do before I did. It preserved me. My hand just immediately shot up, and as soon as I touched hands with this angel, we're all three not moving anymore. We're all three standing back up, and as if we haven't even moved at all. But yet, make no mistake, we were moving, and it was chasing us. Okay, this angel was coming after us. But as soon as I touched hands with it, the whole situation changed, and he changed it. We were all three standing back up, not moving. And this angel, I would say, was standing a good 30, 35 feet away. And I'm just looking up at him. Now, the demon I said was tall. It was 13 feet tall. And this angel, I asked how tall in my head, how tall the demon was, and that's how I know that it was 13 feet. Because like I said, when you ask a question in this place, you get the answer.
Right.
But if I was to guesstimate the angel's height, I would say 9 feet to 9 feet 6 inches.
Okay.
So it wasn't small either. And this angel was looking at me and standing, like I said, standing about 30, 35 feet away, and I'm just looking at it like, wow. And I'm just thinking to myself, he is beautiful. Now, as I always say, and I'll say it again, I know in the English vernacular that the man is called handsome, the woman's called beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And you shouldn't even equate the word beautiful with a male. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't even equate that.
Right.
That's just a sideways thought process. You just shouldn't a man should not look at another man and go, wow, he's beautiful. That's for lack of better words, that's some gay stuff there.
Right.
Okay? That's kind of a weird, screwed thought process. It should not happen. But when I was looking at him, and it was a him, it was almost like the most beautiful man and the most handsome man, the most beautiful woman, face mixed together. And it was almost like, for lack of a better word, it was like this. His body was the body of a man. But yet, when you look at the face, it was almost like the spirit within him was like a female. And you could see it slightly moving beneath the surface of his skin. And sometimes protruding out, protruding in, moving a little bit left, a little bit right. You know what I'm saying? So that his face had the qualities of part man, part woman, but just beautiful.
Right.
And when I say beautiful, I mean beautiful like a rainbow, beautiful like a waterfall, beautiful like a green field. You know what I'm saying? Beautiful like the mountains, beautiful like pure white snow. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That kind of beautiful. I don't mean beautiful like, ooh, I have feelings for him. No kind of sexual thought process going on here. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Beautiful,
that kind of beautiful.
As in perfection.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look at him and just go, wow, he is beautiful. And you know that it's a he because the body is shaped like a he. Even if a woman has on a coat or whatever, you can still see the bits protruding. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you can tell that it's a woman.
Right.
So I mean, you can tell that this. I mean, and just describe the angel for you. I'm going to describe the demon, and I want to describe the angel for you. The angel was roughly 9 feet tall. 9 feet, like I said, 9 feet to 9'6". And that's how tall it was, but I'm guesstimating. And I would say my guesstimation is pretty darn spot on. 9 feet to 9 feet 6 inches tall, with short brown wavy hair pushed to the back, almost like it was combed. an olive-colored skin, with white light coming out of it, so that the skin almost seems to be overshadowed by the white light coming out of it. So that you would almost sit there and say that the skin's white, but it's not. It's olive colored. Kind of like a deep tan. And the shape of the body, the shape of his body, was like a fitness trainer. Strong, powerful, manly. When you look at him, you go, wow, he is tough. He is strong. You don't look at him and go, wow, he's skinny, he's tall. No. You look at him and think, man, this guy can throw down. You know, this is a guy that you want on your side. This guy looks like he can fight. You know, and just the bluest blue eyes you've ever seen. It was like someone had taken a spot out of the sky, a patch of blue out of the sky, or dipped a cup of water out of the ocean and poured it into his eyes. I mean, it was just perfect blue. And like I said, he was androgynous. You couldn't tell. I mean, like I said, like a perfect mix between male and female. And not like, you know, hey, is it Pat? You know, is it Patrick or Patricia, or, you know, like, oh, I don't even know what to think that process through. You know, not like that. You could tell that it was male, but yet with some kind of female attribute in it.
Right.
And it's looking at me. And it's just staring at me, at us. Like I said, we had just been stopped and we're standing there. Now, this thing literally still had a hold of my left shoulder. It was still facing in the direction that it was running, you know, where it was taking me.
Right.
And now it had been stopped, and everything had been reset, and it was pissed. It was furious. I mean, just hugely angry. And it wanted to know, I mean, I could obviously see the white light pouring out from behind it, you know. Right. It wanted to know why it had been stopped. Because the way that this demon perceived it, it owned me. I was there because that's where God had put me. If I had been righteous or holy or whatever, you know, I wouldn't have ended up there. I would have ended up in heaven. But because I was there, it was because I belonged there. And if I belonged there, then why did it not have a perfect right over me? It had every right to just pick me up and crush me and take me apart and disassemble me and put me back together and burn me, and, you know what I'm saying? It had any perfect right to do anything it wanted to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It owned me. Like a pet. Like a dog, like a little kitty cat, like a parakeet. Like a stick of furniture, like a book. It owned me. You know, and it had every right over me. So, it was pissed. It wanted to know why it had been stopped. It had every right to take me anywhere it wanted to. Do anything it wanted to me, throw me anywhere, whatever. So it was turning around to confront this angel. And it was almost like in slow-mo. As this thing was turning around, this angel, the same way it had moved from that great distance, it was just like a flash. It moved, I don't even want to say ran forward. It moved forward and with an open palm struck this demon at about its head height in the sternum. So this demon, its sternum, which is like in between, right below the chest, in between the stomach and the chest, you know, was right at its head height. So it ran up and with an open palm struck this demon in the sternum. And I mean, it hit it with such force that its hand was ripped off my shoulder, just like dumb, you know? and it folded up like a cheap wallet and like in half and flew backwards, skipping off this floor as you can see.
Right.
Now, when I'm watching this thing skip backwards, folded in half, like a stone over water, like skipping a rock on water. And it's going backwards and backwards and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then this angel calls me by a long celestial name, a heavenly name. And I immediately recognized it to be mine. Like I said, I'm watching this thing, and it was like being in a crowded room and hearing your name. Hey, Shawn. And you look over, and they're talking to some other Shawns. But because you heard your name, you looked. Right. But it called me by this name and it's a long name, that I immediately recognized to be mine, and only mine.
Right.
There could have been 10 of us in this room, and anybody else that heard this name wouldn't have responded to it.
Right.
Only me. It was my own personal name that I don't know. Because as soon as it said it, and I looked at it, and I was like, yeah, that's me. It's me. That's me. As soon as I looked at it, the name was drawn out of my mind. As soon as it entered in my ears, it went straight out my head back to that angel that said it. Okay? He erased it from my head. It was gone. I couldn't even remember what it called me. All I know is that it called me by a long, celestial, heavenly name that was mine, that only belonged to me. And as soon as he said this name, I'm like, what name? What? I'm just like caught completely off guard because, I heard my name and then I can't remember it. And it's not that I can't remember it, it's that it took it out of my head. It wiped it.
Huh.
And as soon as I looked at it, he began speaking, but now I want to describe his voice. His voice was like a rushing sound, like a river, like a waterfall, like a stadium full of people, just Shawn. Only, like I said, it was my name's Shawn. It was like a huge, long, heavenly, celestial name. And then I looked over at him, and as the rushing sound all of a sudden becomes very clear. It's no longer rushing anymore. It doesn't sound like a rushing water. It's very clear. It sounds like he's speaking English, but what I understand now at this point is that it wasn't, acquiescence itself down to my level. It wasn't, coming down to my level to speak my broken language of English. It was elevating me up to understand its heavenly language. He never changed his language. If there was 10 people from 10 different countries who only spoke their own language, German, this guy from Germany who only speaks German, and this guy from Russia who only speaks Russia, this guy from, England who only speaks English, and this guy from Sweden, you see what I'm saying? If there was 10 people from different countries that only spoke their own language, they would have all been they would have heard the same rushing water sound, and then they all would have understood his heavenly language.
Wow.
Or they all would have just heard a rushing sound. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And they wouldn't be able to understand it at all. But he elevated me up to understand his language. He didn't come down to my broken language of English. But what I heard was like English. I heard it. I perfectly understood it. He goes, "Hello, my name is Michael." Now, he didn't have to say, "I'm the archangel of the Bible." I'm Michael, the guy that's talked about this one in the future, whip up on Satan. That guy, that's me. He didn't have to say that. All he had to say was, "My name is Michael," and I immediately understood. Like, there's 1,000 Moses on the face of the earth, probably in Los Angeles right now. But if the Moses of the Bible, if I had seen him and he said, "Hi, Moses," I would have understood him to be the Moses of the Bible. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
He said, "Hi, my name is Michael." And then he began talking to me. But I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. And I know they're probably like, "What do you mean you weren't listening to what he was saying? Are you kidding me? This is the archangel of the Bible." You should be listening to what he's saying. You know what I'm saying? But the reason I wasn't listening to what he was saying was because one of those weird supernatural things happened. In my head, inside of my head, a picture formed in between my eyes, and now I understand why they call it the third eye. Okay? But it was not in front of me, but inside my head. But although it was inside my head, probably about half an inch back from the skull, was a picture playing. And I guess this is one of those warning things, kind of like a reflex or whatever. You know, your body trying to sustain itself or keep itself alive. You know, I could see this picture playing. It was round, you know, like a ball, of this demon that had got back up and it was coming back after me. Now, I don't know if he projected himself into my head. You know what I'm saying? Like he projected his own self into my head, or if it was just like some kind of thing that ability that we have that we just don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like in the spirit, you'll be able to see people or something like that from long distance or whatever, or you'll be able to protect yourself or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But this picture, I'm watching this like, it was almost like a movie reel, only it was round. It wasn't like square like a TV set. It was round. And it wasn't like a ball, it was like round like a dot. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like I was looking into a crystal ball, looking into the future or anything. I was just seeing this thing, running back after me, coming back towards me, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, when this angel struck it, it went far away. So even though it was running fast, you know, like 80 to 100 miles per hour, it was still only getting slightly bigger because it was so far away.
Right.
But it was back after me, and my body was just like, hey, buddy, you know, hey, stupid, it's coming back after you. Run, defend yourself, hide. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm just watching this thing getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this, like I said, like a movie reel playing inside my head, literally inside my head. And I'm watching it, and I turn and look, and I lock eyes with it. And as soon as I lock eyes with this demon that's coming back after me, it was still far away. But even though it was still far away, I didn't need to see the movie reel inside my head anymore. I saw it with my own physical eyes, and it was just like 2 points matching up. I don't know if you ever shot a gun before, like a rifle, but you have to match the front sight with the back sight.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's what it was like. It was like these two things came into alignment. This movie reel that was playing inside my head and my physical eyes. As soon as they were aligned, I no longer needed to see it inside my head, so it stopped playing. I was seeing it with my physical eyes. The thing was coming back after me, and what I was seeing was really happening in real time. You know what I'm saying? So this angel was talking to me, but like I said, I was completely caught off guard by this moment. And I looked at, you know, I turned my head, and I'm kind of like, he's just like, blah, 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 blah. And that's all I'm really hearing, because I'm just like, uh-oh, I need to see if this thing's coming back after me. You know, I need to see if what's playing in my head is really happening behind me. So I kind of like look behind me, and sure enough, here it comes. And I'm like, you know, I kind of was like, turned back towards him, like, dude, if you can get me out of here, if you can save me, whatever it is you got to say, please just get it over with, say it fast, and save my scrawny, poor little backside. You know?
Right.
You know, and I call myself scrawny, even though I was still like a big Marine. I'm just like tiny compared to this thing. Even tiny compared to the Archangel. You know, so I kind of look at it and I'm just like, dude, whatever it is, make it fast. Help me. Save me. You know, so I kind of look at him like afraid. You know, what that look like? Come on, do it. Whatever in your head, do it. You know.
All right.
And then he kind of looks at me disappointed, like, you know, don't you know who I am? Don't you know I could smack this thing all over the place? And he kind of gives me that look. You know what I'm saying? Like, dude, for real? You know? You know, like, are you afraid of that thing when I'm here? Are you kidding me? You know? It gives me that look. And it kind of gives me this, like, disappointed look, like, you know, come on, for real? You shouldn't be scared of that thing when I'm here. You know? He kind of, like, gives me this disappointed look, and he looks at me and says, your time has not yet come. It's time for you to go. And then he pointed his arm, and the direction that he pointed his arm, I immediately did a flanking maneuver, just like as if I was in boot camp, and they had left flank march, you know, and I just stepped out to the left, and as soon as my left foot hit the deck, I was back in my body and my eyes opened, and I was laying on that cot where they had placed me. And as soon as my eyes opened, there, you know, one of them, they were still walking around freaking out. You know, so all this that happened, like I said, I mean, in this place, I don't understand. All this stuff took place, but yet when I opened my eyes, it was almost as if they had picked up where they had left off. There, the corporal was still pacing around, Corporal Page still pacing around, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And the other guy's like, Chef, I'm thinking. You know, and my eyes popped open. You know, it's probably only maybe a second of Earth time had passed. Maybe a second. You know, and I picked up just a second after I'd left.